Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in opposition to this bill and House Democrats' completely partisan attempt at actual law enforcement reform. They call it the Justice in Policing Act, but this legislation would not achieve justice for anyone. Instead, it would promote anarchy and put our law enforcement officers' lives at risk. It would end legal protection for our officers who actually follow their training and protocol. It would take essential weapons and protective equipment away from our police. In a time like today where law enforcement officers are ambushed and targeted just because of their profession, we're going to take away their ability to receive protective equipment. So not only do the Democrats want to take away an officer's legal protection if they follow their training and protocol, then they want to take away their protective vests, protective shields, and protective vehicles they get in military transfers that physically protect our officers from bullets, none of which has anything to do with George Floyd's death. How does this make any sense? I can tell you it doesn't make any sense to the mass majority of Americans who trust that someone will be there when they call 911. This legislation comes from the same party who's been calling to defund the police. Members of this very body have called to defund our police officers in our police departments. I have to ask my colleagues how they think that would help. Defunding the police won't solve any problems and only poses an extraordinary risk to our citizens who depend on society's most basic governmental service of protecting life and property. This is nothing more than an outburst of political emotion and a willingness to take advantage of civil unrest. And civil unrest, this civil unrest, is not constructive. It's anarchy. It also does not take into account the hundreds of thousands of good police officers risking everything to keep us safe. Officers like Julian Keene Jr. from my state of Florida. Unfortunately, you'll never hear about the tragic death of this black officer in the mainstream media. It doesn't fit the left's narrative, so they'll ignore it. However, in Florida, we will never forget Officer Keene, who was laid to rest this week, and the positive influence that he had on our community. And after the criminal who killed him found out that he was a police officer in plain clothes, pulled out a gun and killed him. So it begs the question, who's really responsible for the flaws in law enforcement protocols? All of these departments, with all of these problems and issues, are all run by Democratic commissions and Democratic city councils. This is not a federal issue. This is a Minneapolis police issue, or an Atlanta police issue, or a Ferguson issue, or a Chicago issue, where just this past weekend they had one of the most violent weekends over Father's Day weekend. This is an issue with Democratic leadership in these cities who have failed to keep up with standards, training, and protocol. Some of these departments have training standards dating back to the 80s. Why, you ask? Because their Democratic leadership has failed to make necessary reforms in their departments. And now it's the federal government's role to police local police departments run by a Democratic city council or commission. Will those commissions and leaders ever be held accountable? Everyone in this chamber wants justice for George Floyd and his family, and they will get that in a court of law where justice belongs. If the Democratic majority truly wants to reform our police departments, and if they truly want to fix the problems, then the focus should be on the agencies with the problems and their leadership, not passing a progressive messaging bill in an election year that you know has no chance of becoming law. This legislation doesn't get justice for anyone. Instead, it fails to address the real underlying problems while attempting to vilify our law enforcement officers. It won't go anywhere in the Senate, and it certainly won't go to the president's desk. So let's call it what it is, a political messaging bill. The longer we spend on this, the more time we waste in working on actual tangible solutions. Time to put politics aside and work on real solutions where the problems are actually located. And I yield back.